on the record, or people will be jumping in real soon within the next couple of minutes. And I want to see how things have been going with you guys. Anybody want to share if they used nonverbals this week, maybe in tonality, maybe you paid attention to your body language. Either you tried it or you became more aware of it. Anybody want to share? Since Lisa's driving, it's going to be Robert or Jocelyn. And Jocelyn has migraines, Robert. Come on now. Have you tried any? Have you tried anything? Have you been more aware about something?
I'll start it off. I'll give Robert a little bit of a break. I might not make this. Okay, so it has been a week of trying a lot of different things. And in spite of my headache today, in spite of yesterday being brother's birthday, and in spite of the fact that we were trying to get so many things done yesterday, I learned that the nonverbal cues that you try to give everybody are really hard to do. Especially if you're not intentional, you got to be intentional with it.
Yes, you have to be intentional.
Learning to be intentional is really hard for me. But Pastor Brett was saying something really cute. He gave the message. He says, I've been a spitter. Now you got to hear this story. And he goes, but my daughter Lainey is now learning to spit. I go, Pastor, and it's because she's reacting and watching daddy do what daddies do. She's following his role. And I started thinking, if we become as greater role models as we think we are, even by 1%, we are doing a whole lot better today at 1% than we were yesterday at 0%.
That's right. That's right. So even though, you're saying you have to be intentional, which is true, and it's hard to do. It's not hard to do. It's just, it's not a habit.
Yeah.
So once it becomes a habit, I'm telling you, it's not hard because you will be rewarded by doing, especially that mirroring thing we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody thought about
Robert, your turn.
Robert, your turn. You just got tag team there. Robert, your turn.
Oh. I guess, well, we had a big event at our church, so there was a lot of organizations, like it was like a big, massive potluck. And then part of what I was doing was more the setup, cleanup crew. So, mirroring, I guess, in getting other people to participate and help out, it wasn't easy to do. I mean, try to mimic, follow,
Good
and
for you. I'm
reciprocate.
super proud of you for trying that.
Yeah, it's just repetitious, like you said. I mean, it can be easy, just be more knowledgeable about it.
Being more aware. Yep.
Yeah.
Even the body language, being aware of what your face looks like, being aware of the way your body is positioned, that type of thing. Yeah, it just takes practice. Okay. Lisa, do you have something to share? Have you tried any? Now, if you didn't try any of the nonverbals, that's fine. I don't want you to feel like, but this is the segment we're going to then share about anything that, we've been applying just overall. So anything particular to nonverbals, the mirroring, the body language, that's something that you've been trying out or thinking about?
Yeah, I've been trying the mirroring, or at least like paying attention to other people's body language, which is kind of funny because, I mean, I'm listening to them, but I'm also like, oh, what are they doing now? So I'm but I'm trying to do it like how you were saying, like just a variation of how they're, posturing themselves and stuff. So if they're like turning this way, then I'm kind of doing it maybe the opposite way, just because of the logistics and how we're standing.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it made them feel more comfortable with me, but I mean, we were involved in a conversation, so that I guess that's a good thing.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, just being more aware of it was
Yep.
very, very enlightening for me.
Yeah, when I first started doing it, I didn't feel like I got any results because I was just like more focused on figuring it out than, than actually resting in the same energy and frequency as them or whatever, like, so now I can just pick it up and I just start moving it. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but once you get that rhythm, I'm telling you, it works.
Mm.
Yeah. Carol, anything you want to share that you might have tried, or maybe it's just an awareness thing like Lisa just shared?
Yeah,
Over
kind of like Lisa.
specifically last week's topic of nonverbal,
Yeah.
sorry.
I was doing the mirroring thing. I did it in situations because a lot of my Zooms are in groups. So when I was listening, there was that one particular person I was just mirroring just for fun, just to practice. I was doing this, I was doing this, and it was like I wasn't even speaking with her, but I just wanted to practice. So that was, I mean, obviously there's no results, but it was just that thinking about it, and then in a group situation where it's kind of safe, nobody's really noticing what you're doing. So yeah, so that was interesting, just to at least be aware of it.
That is an excellent idea. I think practicing on Zoom is really good because most people are not looking at everybody on the screen, right? So they don't really notice what you're doing. So you're completely like, like nobody's really, you're like incognito in your practice, right? So it's kind of nice. I think that's a really great idea. And we all do Zooms. So picking somebody and then just mirroring, I think I should do that too. I'm going to do that just to keep practicing more and more, so it becomes more and more familiar for me as well. So that's a great idea. Okay. All right. Well, the next thing I want you guys to share is, who would you like to share? Wait. I'm trying to read my own writing. Okay. Okay. So I don't know why I wrote it like that. Sometimes what comes out of my head on paper, if I don't do a second or third pass, it just sounds a little wonky. Okay, so it made sense in my head somehow, but basically, right, who have you changed your approach with? Maybe you thought about their personality type and you changed your approach with them, and or you've thought about, hey, maybe I'm expecting them to be at a certain emotional intelligence level and they're really not. And so you made some adjustments. You don't have to give a name or their relationship to you, but you could say, oh, well, there was this person and I realized they're this. And did you make any adjustments in how you communicated with that individual? Yeah. Okay, Jocelyn, why don't you share? Who was it that you made an adjustment with?
The person that we're staying with. Yeah, I made an adjustment just in my tone and my caring attitude to just shift it even by 1%. And I saw a great shift in her today. She invited me outside. Her friend was from Texas. And so I got to meet her friend. But more importantly, I told her, we just got to be more cognitive of what I'm doing with her. So
Yeah.
that was a good move on my part. I intentionally took my tone down and just got it, because she's really excitable. So I just kind of took it down a couple notches, and it felt really good. Because even today I told her, wow, I don't know about lunch or dinner because I'm just out of it.
Right. And then did you notice a change in her interaction with you?
Yes.
Interesting.
Interesting, because yesterday we took the car because it was brother's birthday. We ended up out in Kahala because I was trying to get to a gas station, but we ended up in Kahala gassing up the car. So on the way back, we did some stuff, and I asked her a couple of questions. I go, oh, just asking because I filled up your tank of gas. So just saying, and she goes, oh, okay, thank you. And so that was like, okay, we're Maybe
And
now they are a little bit more connectable.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Anybody else? Who have you had to change? You made a decision to change your interaction with a person because you've been thinking about the fact that you realize what their personality type is, or maybe adjusted for the emotional intelligence level. So you're trying to avoid things that might cause an emotional response, that type of thing, whatever it is. Or maybe anything at all. Maybe you've approached it, we on our 4th week, we talked about how we're 100% responsible. We take responsibility for us, right? And we come into an agreement for something, we come in at the speed of trust. But part of that equation is we know, right? We know that it's our decision to make that connection, to make that agreement, to go with that. So then if I decide to change my mind, I change my mind. I don't blame that person. That's another lesson that we went through. Anything like that you guys are applying at all? I'm going to pick on Robert because he's smiling. You've gotta have somebody that you changed your approach to. Everybody's feeling sorry for you
Mhm.
because they're all compassionate people.
So one of the things I would do at the office is try to interact with the staff on a weekly part, and that's what Dell would share us to do short meetings with, just to see where they're at. So in this sense, my one of the workers that doesn't speak a lot, so just today, she was like super chatty. So what did I do differently? I'm not sure, but she felt more open to share. Oh, wait. The common thread was something to do with the work. And it was interesting for her, and then she could share it because she could relate it to herself. That's what happened.
So do you recognize if you changed an approach in any way? Did you try if she was an S, did you try to get a little more, relational in terms of how are you doing about that, more so than normal, or that's just a hypothetical, like anything like that you just made small little adjustments with?
To me, I think I did it off the hip, but I mean, it had to be with some kind of purpose from our lessons.
It's in there somewhere because it's in the subconscious brain. So you did it.
Yeah.
But I want you to reflect on that, Robert. I want you to take some time later today or tonight before you go to bed and reflect on, was there something, okay, because you're maybe just doing it off the hip, like you said, right? But think about it, slow yourself down and think, is there something that you actually made an adjustment on?
Well, I think I did. I did, but I can't think too fast yet.
Yeah, well, try to put your finger on it. Okay, so that's going to help if you do some reflection.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. I'm not going to let you get away with trying to do some reflection on that. That's important. Welcome, Renee. I am going to.
Hi, so sorry.
That's
I'm running
okay.
around.
Okay, I'm going to share screen. We're going to go into our talk, and then tonight's going to be a little bit different, all right? Okay, in the last 2 weeks, we specifically were heavy on content. We've been heavy on content pretty much every week, but not as much as the last 2 weeks, because it was less conversational and a lot of content and then practice. But today we're going to do our mastermind together. So be ready, guys. So even if you can't put your video on, I want you to make sure that you're contributing today. And so I'm going to call names like I already started, right? So we're going to be masterminding together. We're going to be engaging and processing out loud as we go through the material for today so that we can be ready to participate. And our purpose is to deepen our understanding of the different generations and how they view authority, which impacts the communication within the workplace. Now, this is important because Gen Z and millennials right now are making up over 50% of the organization, and the people most at the top who are leading them in management positions or even if you're recruiting for sales or anything like that, you're going to be an older generation, like a Gen X or a boomer, right? So that's a big divide, and learning how to interact and how and why people do what they do is super important. And you're going to hear me repeat myself about why, where the foundation of that is. But when we come up with the purpose of communicating well and understanding each other, what's going to happen is that we are going to expand our awareness, which awareness is the foundation for all transformation, right? That's why Robert's going to reflect tonight about what actually did I do to get that different response. Awareness is the foundation for all transformation in our lives. It's also going to help our effectiveness with people, and we are going to build our influence so that we can lead better. Well, to do that, we need to understand how we process information coming at us from all of our experiences, right? And how we look at those experiences, which shapes our perspective. And each generation has their own set of experiences corporately. That's what I'm talking about right now. Corporately, not individually, but corporately. So there are two parts of the brain. You guys know this. We're looking at the frontal part of the brain, which is the conscious part of the brain. That's the logical executive function part. And then the subconscious, which is at the back of the brain, where we'll say stores our emotions. And the subconscious is where we shape our perspective on life, because our memories and experiences in life are stored there. So our beliefs and understanding about ourselves, other people, and the world are all stored there. So from birth to age 9, we lack the ability to reason inductively. That's being able to see things from a bird's eye view, all the different multiple components, the different perspectives. That's inductive reasoning, to be able to come up with a reasonable conclusion of what's going on. We only reasoned with what was happening in our life during these years deductively. And deductive reasoning stores beliefs in the subconscious part of our mind. It's based completely on how we emotionally felt when we were experiencing things. So everything that goes on there, we automatically accept as truth. Everything that's stored in the back of that brain of ours is accepted as truth, right? So it shapes the way we look at things, look at people, and look at the world. Now, is it true? No, because the decisions that we made in what we want to believe, the things that we believe are truth, came out of deductive reasoning on how we experience situations. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at each generation, what was going on at the time that they grew up that does shape the perspective lens that they're looking through in the workplace, impacting their decisions and behavior in the workplace as well. Now, generational differences have been around forever, right? I mean, you always have a new crop of people coming in. I think when we were all coming in, we just did a lot of what we were told to do, but we also saw things that we wanted to have changed. I mean, everybody kind of goes through that. There's nothing new about that. But what is new for the first time is that we have 4, sometimes 5 generations working together at the same time. That's never happened before. And with technology and the things that are accessible to the generation is shortening. So where we used to consider a generation 40 years, there's even what they're calling sub-millennials. So in a millennial year time frame, there's like little subsections, and that's influenced by the technology that the kids are being exposed to. So today, more business owners, more employers and managers are struggling to communicate company values or work ethics with the newer generations coming into the workforce. And the need for mentorship or social professionalism is increasingly necessary so that we can educate on expectations, on protocols, and which all helps to determine the social culture. So ultimately, with the outcome of understanding and a more efficient work dynamics. So first, let's take a look at the baby boomers. Now I'm going to show you this slide, and then I'm going to turn it off and we're going to have a discussion. So I want you to really be thinking about people you know, maybe in your workplace or even in your family or ministry. Maybe a lot of us go to church, so maybe somebody you have to work with in ministry for church that's in this generation. See if the light bulbs go on for you. Look at how you might address things differently with them when you're having a conversation. Okay, so for the baby boomers, when they were growing up, there was a boom of babies after World War II. We've all heard this before. And these kids grew up in a time of expansion. They came out of the Depression already. The economy was swelling. So they grew up idealistic and they questioned everything, right? America was becoming the #1 economy globally. More Americans were making better income and businesses were expanding. It was a hopeful time in America. So boomers became consumers, right? And they became audacious and expressive consumers. You think about the not the sitcom, but the series back in the days of Dallas. You know, those kinds of movies were like very reminiscent of that generation, just wanting more and being spenders and consumers. And that's the kind of entertainment they were looking for. And because of their large numbers of population, they ended up very competitive, right? Competing against each other. And information became more and more accessible. So they began to question authority and they were skeptics. So I'm going to stop sharing screen for a bit. And the question I have for you, okay, the question I have for you is, so what do you think it was like for them growing up in that time? Maybe you are a boomer. You know, what was it like for you? And if you are a boomer and you can sit there and go, yeah, I kind of remember that, or I remember this. How has it shaped the way that you do your communication in the workplace, let's say? Who wants to go first? What do you think it was like for them growing up? Or maybe you have personal experience of it. I'm gonna start calling names. Who wants to go first? Just take a shot. We're just starting dialogue. Once you start dialogue, then other people start thinking. I want you to think into what somebody's saying so we get the dialogue going. Yes, Jocelyn.
I am a baby boomer. And it's funny when you think we were the greatest generation to ever live. And then we pass it on to our kids and further down the road, looking at it, it's different. Their value system, very different from ours. What we valued as competency, compliance, they kind of go, why do you need compliance? Why do you need this? Why do you need that? And they're questioning a lot more than we did. I thought we questioned enough, but by golly, they
so how has your experience growing up and being a boomer affect your communication style?
I've had to stop and think, who am I actually talking to? And how do I address this gap? You know, how do I, what words do I want to use? And I'm not the best word mastery person, but it comes out pretty close, you know, when I have to tell them something. Or if they don't understand, I say, well, let's look at it in a different point of view. Let's look at it from here. And it takes me a little bit of time because I have to think it through before I say it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You have to think it through before you say it because we're used to thinking a different way, like our generation, right? So somebody answer the question, what might the expectations of a boomer be in the workplace in terms of, you know, other people's collaboration, other people's style of work? What might their expectations be with this kind of upbringing where they started to question things, but, you know, they were extravagant and just hopeful and, yeah. What do you think their expectations might be? Do you want to look at the slide again? Would that help?
Would they be they expect you to listen? They're the boss. They like, I'm the boss. You listen to me. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely could possibly be it for sure. Anybody else want to speak to that? Do you feel that that might be the case as well? I'm gonna leave this up, but I'm gonna open the box so I can see you all. So you won't see everything in here. So anybody else? So they were
Gotta
in,
remember, we're very competitive too.
yes, competitive. That's so true. Anybody else? You can talk about attitudes. What do you think their attitude is in the workplace? I like that, Renee, you already answered that question. It's like, I'm the boss. That's the attitude, right? They're competitive. Somebody else has to, I'm going to start calling names. One more person has to go. Carol, thank you.
Yeah, I think I would think boomers have high expectations of others, like maybe sometimes unrealistic, work late, work long hours. Your work comes first before your family. I mean, that reminds me of the generation. I'm not sure it fits in there, but I just feel like that's part of that. Maybe whole idea of expansion and growth, and that, you know, work is really important, and you put in a lot of hours to climb that ladder. So
I think that absolutely does play into that. And the fact that, like Jocelyn was pointing out, they're competitive, right? So you just do whatever you need to be able to expand and compete, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for adding to that. Okay, we're going to move on for those of you who are, but Lisa, we're going to come to you. Robert, we're going to come to you. So here we go with the Xers. Okay, so the Xers, this generation, I think my box is in the way. Let me move that. Okay, so this generation began with the birth control pill and the legalization of abortion. And so they were a smaller population in number. They grew up during the Vietnam War, Watergate scandals, the OPEC oil crisis. I remember being a very little girl and hearing on the news about the long lines, and they had positive, odd numbers and even numbers, which determined when you could go and get gas, you know, and that scared me because I thought, is there going to be enough? And that started to put scarcity thinking into me, right? And so they grew up during those issues plaguing them as they were growing up. And they began to see their leaders lying to them, right? With the Watergate and all of that, the Vietnam, they were protesting Vietnam. Nobody protested before. Now they're protesting. And they grew up skeptical and jaded. Divorce was climbing. So they became latchkey kids, making them independent. All right, so we're gonna stop here. I'm gonna leave this open for you to look at so you can think this through. But again, what do you think it was like for them when they were growing up? I mean, I'm like at the very beginning of the Xers, so I remember what it was like, but how do you think it affects their communication? How do they show up in the workplace? They grew up with the fear of things around them, being lied to. They were independent, having to figure things out for themselves because mom and dad weren't home when they got home from school.
Maybe they were more entrepreneurial, or had to, like, didn't want to fit into the mold of what their parents did. So they kind of, you know, branched out, maybe ventured to do other interests or other things. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's really true. They didn't want to be like their parents. That is very true. How do you think that affected the way they communicated when even if they were entrepreneurial and they did other things, they still had to communicate, whether they had staff, right? Or a team that they were developing somehow. How do you think their communication came across? What do you think drove their communication? What might their expectations be? Or their attitudes? You can pick any one of those. It doesn't have to be the question I'm asking specifically. How do they show up? So even as they're entrepreneurial and you're trying to do things differently, how does that affect their interactions? Robert, you know I'm coming to you next, right? You might as well just volunteer so that I don't call you later. Volunteer for one you want to say quickly. So how do you think they show up in the workplace, Gen Xers?
Can I say something?
Sure, Jocelyn.
My late daughter was a Gen Xer, and she showed up for work on time, believe it or not. She had a job. But more of, I remember the kids telling me she was more like the mother in the group, which is kind of funny. Because when they would go to Safeway and Hawaii Kai, she would make each one of them go up an aisle and pick something in that aisle. So she'd be walking in the front of the registers. And every one of them at her funeral said, you know, she was just like a mother figure to us. That being that she wasn't a latchkey child, but she was a child of out of the norm because we had a family. And grandpa was with us. She had these kids that were latchkey kids, and she just brought them all, you know, under the roof and just said, okay, we're going to go up to James's house and we're going to have dinner. So we're going to all hop in a car. So they would take 2 cars down. And once they got in the car, this was our rule. The girls all got strapped in the car. And she says, okay, once I start the car, you guys all got to shut up.
Okay, so she was noticing that those in her generation, maybe younger in the generation, were latchkey kids. They didn't really have guidance, they didn't have modeling, but because she did, she was kind of like mentoring them along the way. I think that's awesome. I think that's a real testament to her character. How do you guys think? So this we're talking about how they're contributing to the workplace. Okay, so how does this generation contribute to the workplace and the communication dynamics? So I like how you're describing, Jocelyn, your daughter to me was a bridge builder. From those that were maybe like really independent and without that modeling, and bridging them into being connected in a community within their workplace or whatever, you know, I like that. So how do you guys think they showed up in the workplace and they communicated?
I don't know. I'll take a stab at this.
Okay,
I guess
thank you, Lisa.
maybe kind of piggybacking on what you guys were saying about what Jocelyn was saying about her daughter. Maybe they're skeptical of authority, but then maybe amongst their peers, they're a little bit more connected because maybe they don't have family, or they're not bonding with their authority figures in their lives. So maybe they find, you know, comfort or camaraderie amongst their peers. So maybe communication with their peers are good, but maybe amongst the higher ups or supervisors, maybe it's a little more rebellious or strained. Or
yeah, I like that.
that.
I can see that happening. And if we know that to be like, if we see that to be the dynamic and you consider their generation, then we know how to be able to connect with them more like on a lateral, like, you know, lateral plane, so that they can stay connected to the team getting the work done, right? Renee, you unmuted. Did you want to add something to what Lisa said?
Well, I was just reflecting. I guess I'm a Gen Xer, right? And so I'm reflecting on my communication style specifically in the workplace. I think for me, I actually was looking for a mentorship and authority in the workplace that I could respect. I don't know how that reflects on communication, but I'm just kind of reflecting my particular communication style in the workplace. But I was looking for leadership, and so because my mom wasn't around, she was always working. So in the workplace, I specifically needed a good leader. And if I didn't have someone who was going to communicate the vision and communicate what we're doing, then I just couldn't follow. I just kind of looked for, I didn't thrive when communication from leadership was not well, when it wasn't a good leadership.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. And I do feel like that's definitely how I came into the workforce too, being a latchkey kid in many regards. So looking for some sort of model to show me, some strong, you're basically looking for a surrogate parent, right? Because you don't have that growing up. So I think that's really interesting as well. And I think it could be both ways. It could be either way. So just being mindful of how they were shaped in their childhood. And this is their perspective that is stored in the back of their brains if they have not dealt with those belief systems about their experiences. So it could be where they are just going to be going for a connection with somebody on a lateral level versus somebody going up, or it could be I'm looking for somebody to be a surrogate parent. Come on, somebody model something good, right? In terms of leadership. And so being mindful of that is very important. Okay, we're going to move on to the millennials. So let me close this box for you. So for the millennials, they were raised by parents who were preoccupied with their safety, right? Always wanting to make sure that they were kept safe. So now we started having all kinds of regulations pop up about this and that and seatbelt laws and all this stuff. So with their children's self-esteem was also much more of a focus. Make sure that you're feeling okay, that you're expressing your emotions. And with gaining status became very important, that their kids would do well, that they would provide what they could. This is for the millennials. Life was customized to the millennial. Entitlement naturally began to grow and participation trophies were for everybody. They were the generation of firsts. The first that didn't need an adult to get information because they started to grow into getting access through Facebook and other things. Google started to get more robust. First, who could broadcast every emotion and every thought on IM. Back then they called it Instant Messenger. Also, Snapchat started at that time. So they were the first to let everybody know how they felt about everything, right? They were the first to think that influence was something that happened on social media as you saw people's accounts blow up. So they were the first to enjoy external stimulus at their fingertips 24/7, first to feel alone and isolated as a result, because they were the first to learn more about learn about what they needed in class from their devices. There wasn't as much of this interaction going on. And this new generation was first to foster more self-centered tendencies. So as we look at this, I want to kind of open the box again and say, how do you think this affects the way they show up in the workplace? How do you think this affects the way they communicate? Robert. I'm going to let you think about it, but you're going to go second. So Carol, would you like to start off? How do you think this affects the millennials? How does this affect their way of communicating and how they show up in the workplace?
I think if you think about maybe the generation of first and more self-centered tendencies, I think they focus on maybe a little less tendency to focus on the big picture and more to focus on me. How is it affecting me at work? How am I feeling? I'm not moving in the career ladder. So because of that self-centered tendency, rather than maybe like the boomers think about the big vision, the big picture, I think maybe the millennials think a little bit about how is it impacting me personally, and that because that's how they grew up, right? In that way. So that's my thought of what they might think.
Yeah, how many of you think that might be the case? That it's like they're showing up about how they're impacted by it. I mean, I've never known a generation until the millennials that do a self-care day, like just that morning they decide to wake up and have a self-care day because it affects them, right? And so how does that affect the dynamic in the office when you've got the boomers leading and the Xers leading And you've got these millennials that are coming in going, well, I don't know how is this affecting me? How does that need to change the dynamic of communication? How is it affected? How does it need to change? How's it affecting the communication dynamic first? How about that one? Robert, how's it affecting the communication dynamic?
That's all I can say. Well, it actually, for me, that's kind of the type of employees that I've been cycling through. They want something and do little, so entitlement. And if there was another opportunity to go somewhere, there's no 2 weeks. They just leave or no show or whatever. So that's the frustrating part. Yet we try to set expectations so that they know what's expected of them, and then at least make intention to improve while they're probationary. But again, it's hard to keep people.
Yeah. And so what adjustments have to happen for you mentally for you to start like onboarding them differently than ever before?
Well, that's what I thought I was doing, onboarding them, giving them a list. This is what's expected of you if you want to keep this position, and these are
Right,
the
but how did you
steps.
have to shift in your thinking? Because did you have to do that before?
No, we would just OJT, you do this, you do that.
Right. So now how did you have to shift your thinking so that you could meet them where they were at and make sure they understood the expectations? What had to happen in your head to make that adjustment? As because are you an Xer or a boomer?
I'm right in the middle,
You're right
right
in
at
the
the
middle.
beginning and the end of the other.
So you did have to make some mental changes, right? In order to make that onboarding shift, right?
Well, yeah, it's like my way or the highway, or but that's where we were thinking, okay, it needs to be listed, it needs to be written out, it needs to be explained, and then ask questions if there's anything that needs to be clarified, give them the opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, right. That's so key, because if they can ask questions, it's going to usually be about how are they affected by that? What do they need to know? Because they will be affected by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That really does take an adjustment for sure. Okay, so we're going to move on to Gen Z. And next week, we're going to continue this conversation, because next week, we're actually going to talk about how to mentor the new generation coming up, which is Generation Z, because it takes even more adjustment than working with the millennials. And even millennials will tell you they're frustrated with Gen Z. So the first thing about millennials is today's generation is growing up in the wake of 3 economic recessions, mass shootings they see all the time. They never know. I mean, they play video games that are shooting people, and they never know if their school or their library or their whatever is going to be a real game. You see what I'm saying? That's how they're growing up. Global pandemic. That never happened before, but now they're growing up with this global pandemic shutdown. Political polarization like we've never seen before. This is what Gen Z is seeing all the time. And so it produces a lot of anxiety because they get that feed of all of these things 24/7 on their device, 24/7. So therefore, they have a lot of mental health issues. Close that down for you guys, sorry. That is, mental health is the top issue for Gen Z coming in. So as an employer or manager, we need to start making shifts to make concession, if you will, or margins or frameworks for mental health. That's why they take mental health days, more so the millennials have really caught on to that. But Gen Z is the one generation that's filled with more anxiety than ever before. And they have a fluid sense of identity. So that means like, oh, maybe it's this today, maybe it's this tomorrow. So that becomes a little unpredictable. They're overwhelmed like with the mental health issues, like I said, and it's been normalized. Mental health has become normalized for Gen Z. They think in terms of reinvention, right? They're not interested in incremental tweaks. They want to totally disrupt. Actually, I'm on a different slide. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so they're entrepreneurial, right? They want to reinvent. They are looking for, they're not just looking for incremental tweaks. They want to overhaul things. They want to be a disruptor. They want to be. They're entrepreneurial. They want to start something rather than join something. They learn in teams while in school. So they started to have work pods, right? They started working as teams and learning in teams. Sorry, somebody's coming in. So they're smart technology hackers. They own this world. They are connected globally with both work and play. So the world is smaller for them than their previous generations. Listen, I just watched a really great movie to describe a Gen Z's world. It's on Netflix. It's called Missing. Now, I will let you know it is a crime movie, but you wouldn't know it starting off. I'm a spoiler alert. But the reason why I'm saying this is because what I want you guys to get from that movie is to see the way that they created this character and the way they filmed it and everything was totally Gen Z. Okay, it's the true Gen Z picture. So now I'm going to open up the framework. How do you guys think the way they grew up and the way they think now is affecting how they show up in the workplace and how they communicate? How is Gen Z, how is their experience in life affecting the way they show up in the workplace? And how they're communicating? Anybody can go, because we're running out of time. So I need you guys to just jump in there and start talking.
Think about the mental health issues, and I wonder how that impacts, because yeah, it is, there's a lot more anxiety because of what they face that we never had to, that a pandemic and mass shootings. I mean, that's their world, and we never had that. So how that affects their mental health and how, I don't know how to work with that exactly, but I think just to be aware of that, that's the world that they live in and their experience growing up, and just really be, I guess, sensitive to that's where they come from.
So how would that, Carol, that's a really good point. And I'd like you to answer first, and let's open this up to a greater discussion, because this is becoming more and more the pain point of the workplace, right? Just dealing with the millennials and the Gen Zers. And I shouldn't say it that way, but understanding them. How would we then change the way that we're approaching it? Understanding that they're filled with anxiety and would have mental health issues based on what they've been exposed to in childhood. Remember what we talked about earlier on in the lesson, age 0 to 9 is when they're deductively reasoning. So everything they're experiencing it, when it comes in from the device, that news feed or whatever their friends are talking about the shooting or about whatever, it goes into that back part of the brain, because kids, those Gen Zers, they're the ones that, remember, you're walking down the street and you see a mom giving them a phone and they're two years old. They grew up with this phone in their hand, right? How does that change our communication approach? Because we've already established many of us are either Xers or boomers.
I think they have a hard time communicating verbally. They definitely do not like conflict. They run from it. And so even with my kids, they literally text each other or they talk on Discord. It's a lot of texting, that type of stuff. And you don't see a lot of, interactive type things. So, and I think the workplace is starting to kind of catch on, because you notice that there's a lot more remote jobs available, because a lot of the work that can be done, they can be done remotely. So if you want to accommodate these Gen Zers, you kind of have to look at the different landscape of how you're offering positions. You know what I mean? It's not going to be the typical 9 to 5 clock in, clock out. It's not going to happen for most of these guys. They really are looking for especially those that have the talent. They're working remotely. And I know lots of people, even in the healthcare industry, they're all working remotely.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Nam. Carol, you want to say something about that, or we're going to add something else?
It's related to the mental health issue. I think about like, because there are a lot more mental health issues in this generation, understandably so, is really how do you create a safe space for them in the workplace so they feel heard and understood. I think my company is kind of Gen X-y, so they're very much about social emotional space. How are you doing? Like you're actually valued as a manager and how you ask people how they're doing and create those safe spaces versus other things. So it's very interesting to work in that environment, but very, I think being able to provide this safe emotional space for the Gen Zers and the Gen Xers so they can be heard and valued and they feel like they're safe with you as a supervisor or as a boss or owner or whatever. I think is really important. And they have that place to talk to somebody if they needed to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. All right. Anybody else? How are you going to have to adjust as an individual in whatever generation you are in the way that you think?
You gotta become tech savvy. No matter what generation you're in, you gotta learn how to be tech savvy. At
And how
least
is-
know,
Jocelyn, how's that's going to help you interact with a Gen Zer?
because if a Gen Zer is on the phone texting me something, I gotta be able to answer them back with a text saying, okay, I follow you, but what about this? And if they don't want to communicate face to face, then it's their option. But you as a manager and you as a team leader, you just got to be able to go with what they have. The Gen Zers are the tech savvy kids. And if you know, if you're not the smartest person in the world, go ask them. You know what? Grandma here needs help. Trust me, they will help you. Go, oldest auntie, grandma, whatever you want to call yourself, but they will help you because they're at the stage of, I want to help somebody. I don't know who. They're kind of in this space. And if you don't know how to do something, say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me out? Give me 5 points on how to do this, or 3, and basic points. And
Yep. Yep, that's great. Yeah, that's how to get them involved. Renee, you unmuted.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Ultimately, though, they're still people. And it's heart to heart. If they don't, they do not, John Maxwell, right? He says, people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. So can you like connect with them, know what personality trait there are, speak their language? Yeah, you have to, you know, if you're in the workplace with a Gen Zer, you're gonna have to make, you know, you have to account for the mental health and, you know, talk about, you know, how they're doing and that type of thing. But I mean, ultimately, the overall picture that I see is it's still people. And if you can connect hard and get to know them sincerely, ask questions that that are important to them. Find out what's important to them and ask questions, and you know, have them trust you. Then they can open up and you can speak. Anyway, that's what I think.
Yeah, yeah. Now, coming from the viewpoint where you're running the company and you're hiring people and things are moving at a fast pace, sometimes it gets so stressful. You don't have that time. But then there are, moments where there's a little bit of a lull in the pace or stress, at least you hope. And then those are the moments when you can capture time to develop trust, because that is important. What you're talking about is trust. But it is a little bit different when you're running a business and you're hiring these people, so in terms of the pressure that you feel as the business owner or the supervisor that has to get the job accomplished from whoever top down is mandating that. And so it doesn't give you as much flexibility to spend that amount of time. So Does anybody have anything to say about how to help that person who has to work with a staff that's like that and they're just like running a mile a minute? Or anything else? You can say anything else about that. Lisa, Robert?
Slow down,
Yeah.
slow down.
I'm gonna tell you, like straight up, guys, it is a different story when you're the one running the company. Yeah, you know you need to slow down. You need to slow down for your own health. You need to slow down. You know what I mean? But the reality is it's not always possible. It's a luxury sometimes, I guess is what I'm saying. So slowing the brain down is something that I talk to people about all the time in coaching so that we can process better, respond better. Absolutely, Jocelyn. But let's be a little more understanding about the person who's actually running things, and it's not always that easy. Okay, so anybody else want to contribute anything about what we're talking about with the Gen Zers? Any thoughts that
True.
came to you? Yes,
True.
Jocelyn?
True. You need to slow down. If you're like me or Gen X, which would be my late daughter, you just need to slow down for them. Don't catch up. But don't slow it down for everybody. Just slow it down enough so that they'll catch up to you. Understand that not everybody's going to be in the same boat at the same time, and they're not going to be moving at the same time. That is one of the biggest problems that major corporations have. They want things done on time. And you go, God made the day, God made night and day in one day. What is one day to him versus 1 second? So you got to just adjust your lifestyle to theirs and learn to adjust it. It may be the best thing for your health, because that's what I have to do, is kind of slow down, because I'm the workaholic. I've had to slow down. Even today was difficult, but just slow down. It's not going to kill you. The
Okay, so
project will be there.
next week, we're going to talk about, it's a two-way street. Okay, next week, we're going to talk about, it's a two-way street. So yes, I'm going to say you're 100% right. And I also say that we also need to train the next generation on how to be able to understand social professionalism so that we can have a cohesive workplace. So if we're all accommodating one generation, so we all need to make transitions, right? So if we're accommodating one generation, that's not a solution. So how do we help another generation acclimate to some middle ground so that there's cohesiveness in the culture? Because we can't ignore somebody else's generation as well in the way they think and the experiences that they've had. So we want to make sure that when we are talking about communication, it's about connection and understanding. So if we want just one group of people to accommodate and change for the other group of people, it doesn't work. So all parties have to come to an agreement, but in the younger generation, we have to mentor them to that because they haven't been taught and they're filled with anxiety, right? Does that make sense? Carol, you look like you had a thought.
Well, I'm just thinking about that. I mean, because our own kids are probably Gen Zers and Gen Xers, right? So what does that look like for them in the workplace? And I think it's mentorship is so key. And how do you get, but I don't quite know what that looks like, because that's how they see their world. So how do you raise the bar it doesn't even have to be like us, but raise the bar of like professionalism and how you come across and how you show up. I don't know. I think that's next week we'll probably talk about that, but it's something that I don't know what that looks like, to raise that bar in a way that is relevant for them.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a great conversation because I'm going to give a platform for us to be able to talk about that. And so as the ideas come out, I want us to come ready to contribute to, I don't know that this is how they'll respond, or I don't know if that's that's the conversation we want. That's the masterminding going on, right? Because we all have to work with different generations and we have to teach them how to work with us as well in a mentorship format. Okay. Let me move on to the last part of this teaching. And then Robert, you can either talk now based on this conversation we just had, or I'll call your name for the next one and you don't even know what I'm going to say next. So which is it going to be?
Surprise me.
Okay, all right, I'm going to surprise you. Wow, living on the edge there, Robert. All right, I'm going to surprise you. Okay, let me close this box. Here we go. All right. So we're going to talk about, in our last segment, how each generation views authority. This also impacts the way that they show up in the workplace. And you guys kind of already touched on this as we went through the different generations and what they experienced and how they view life. So we kind of started that conversation anyway. So let's look at first the Gen Xers. Now, Gen Xers, boomers. Boomers felt like they could solve the problem of authority just by taking over. Remember, they are the competitive ones. They had so much in their population, they had to compete, and they were all about, just conquering the day and expansion. So boomers solved the problem of authority just by taking over. You wait till I become boss, and then we're going to do it my way. And we kind of touched on that way. It's my way or the highway, right? And then we have the Gen Xers. Gen Xers decided, in terms of dealing with authority, that they're just going to unplug. They're just going to unplug from authority and simply endure them. Now, that's a little bit different from what Renee and I experienced, because I did have a little bit of an attitude thinking that some of my authority didn't know what they were talking about, like most young people do. But I was looking for authority somewhere that could be a great leader and a great mentor. And I will say that the majority of my growing up years, I didn't find it. And so especially when just in this group, I wasn't a Christian. So, that's kind of hard because the standards are different from what I was looking for. So I had a little bit of a different experience, and so did Renee. But for the most part, as they were surveyed and researched, they decided to unplug from authority and just endure it. It's a part of life. You can't do anything about it. And so what did millennials do? Millennials said, you could choose your authority because life is a big cafeteria. They are picking who they will genuinely follow. Know this when you hire a millennial. Generally speaking, based on the data, they are making choices about who they want to follow. Remember, they were raised by Gen X and maybe some younger boomers who focused on their self-esteem, the millennials' self-esteem, and then how they felt about everything, and they got participation trophies. So they get to choose their authority, just like they chose how they felt about something. Like Carol brought out, it's like how I'm affected by this, how I'm experiencing it. It's exactly the same way they're approaching authority. Gen Z, with regards to authority, they ask Google questions that we used to ask our parents about, right? So if they were honest, millions of them would say, what do they really know about my future? And if you think about it, with everything they grew up with mass shootings and recessions and all of that, is the future even predictable or unsure? So of course they'd wonder if an authority can help them with their future, right? So they are starting to move away from college because they find the information they need on YouTube. Again, watch that movie, Missing, on Netflix, right? Make sure if you have kids that you vet it first before you look at it. It is a crime movie. But it's totally a Gen Z movie. Now let's stop here. We're going to stop and camp here. How do you think their interaction with authority impacts the office dynamics, the office culture? And you can pick any generation, or you can pick any generation. How do you think that affects the office culture based on how they view authority? Did you ever realize that millennials decided they're going to pick who they want to be as an authority, who they want as authority, or that Gen Zers think authorities know nothing? They can't help them. I can find out what I need on YouTube. My son says that. He's a total Gen Zer. I can find everything I need on Google. How does that affect the work dynamic? Robert? Surprise!
Oh, surprise. A lot of, well, just like your son, looking at things in the YouTube, one of the employees, yeah, that's how she would find out how to do something that was on the that list that I had for them to complete. So it wasn't anything mentorship of my existing worker, senior worker to show. They just looked it up, and she had the answer right and ready. So in that sense, it was just a quick Google access to get information.
Yeah. How does that affect the workplace? Good or bad? Anyway, doesn't
I
matter.
think it had a good point where at least they took self-initiative to be prepared or you know, getting, it was a good resource, in other words. And so to me, it was a plus.
Okay, good. All right. Who else, Lisa? Who else, Lisa? And Nam, if you can talk. I don't think I heard from you for a while, unless I don't remember. How do you think it causes them to show up in the workplace when they view authority this way? How does it affect the dynamic? Just go ahead and process. Anybody can talk. Oh, Lisa, great.
Probably there would be more frustration from the older generations, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah. I think because they're expecting the younger generation to maybe look up to them, which the millennials would if they're chosen. If you're the chosen leader for them. But if, for Gen Z, I mean, they might, the baby boomers or Gen Xers might incorrectly view the Gen Z as like insubordinate because they're not like turning to you for, instruction or guidance and just kind of doing things on their own or researching things on their own. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Anybody else want to contribute to that?
I think just having a son who's a Gen Z, or sometimes they view knowledge as wisdom, and it's not. And like, how do you, there's a maturity level that has to come through. So I think in the workplace, sometimes you see the Gen Zers emerging as like that they know a lot, and they do know a lot of information, but they don't quite have wisdom just because they're so young. So I think that can be a really disconnect where like, I don't need to listen to you necessarily because you don't know as much as I do about technology or about how to use this or do this, which is true. But at the same time, like to be able to say, hey, but there's also a lot of wisdom that comes with just, having more experience or being older. And so to navigate those pieces, like each of us has something to bring, but there can be a disconnect in how they view us, maybe in how we view them too, as well.
Really good. Really good. Anybody else? Renee, I see you trying to unmute.
I'm just imagining, right? That if I'm the leader, I need to really make sure I elevate my game, number one, right? If I'm gonna lead in certain area, or I'm gonna, give authority to them. But like because they first in, and they can get the information that if I can't fake it basically, right? I can't fake it. I've got to know my stuff. So I need to be clear and just know whatever I'm trying to give direction for, make sure I'm not, or I'm giving them the authority. Like, anyway, I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is part one. Next week, we're going to do part two, and we're going to put a little more emphasis on what does each generation contribute from their experiences, as well as how do we communicate with them so that we can create more cohesiveness with the generations. This is generational diversity and inclusion. So I am like, yeah, compliant. No, I'm just, that was a bad joke. I don't know if anybody got that one, but anyway, so what I want us to do as we close out is I kind of want you guys to go around and say, what was your aha moment in this lesson in terms of elevating your, like Renee, you're like prophetic. You just started the whole conversation there. How is it going to elevate your game in communication? What was the aha moment? How is it going to elevate you? Now, maybe elevating you is being more aware when you're talking to another generation about their experiences in life. That's an elevation right there, right? So don't think it has to be big and, big and bold. All right, so Jocelyn, can you go first? What was your aha moment and how is it going to impact your communication? You have just like less than a minute.
My aha moment is that Gen Zers are real entrepreneurs, and the communication is maybe getting them to solve a small problem first and then go on to a bigger one.
Nice. Okay, Lisa, how about you? Actually, back up. Jocelyn, pick somebody real quick.
Robert,
real quick. You're like, dang it, these women.
Hey, bust up, man.
We're expecting you to come to the field to play, dude.
No. Okay.
It's like golf. Get that golf club out. Let's go. What was the aha moment for you?
The aha moment was that the millennials, I can relate because that's where my son is at, and as far as making use of what we're doing now, that'll make me more aware of his approach, or be approachable with, so that I could be more approachable with him. And that's
Good.
it. And then, I mean, besides him, I got a young staff, so
Yeah,
it's
you do.
one of those Gen Z millennials that it'll be a lot more easier to and not make it up on my hip.
Yep. Good. Okay, who are you gonna pick?
Oh,
Quick,
Lisa.
Lisa. There we go, Lisa. And when you're done, you pick somebody.
I don't know if it's an aha moment, but I'm like really struggling with having to accommodate, I guess, like, and I mean, I feel like, come on, like get a move on, guys. We got work. I don't know. Maybe that's the C in me. Maybe, I don't know. So I'm feeling a little with this information that's coming. I mean, I knew that there were different generational work ethics and all of that, but I think like bringing this to the forefront is kind of making me a little anxious, actually. And like just thinking of how, I feel like I just need to kind of process that a little bit more.
Yeah,
and I'll get there.
Yeah, watch
Sorry.
this. No, that's okay. Watch this recording when you get it, because it's going to help you to prepare for next week. And I'll tell you, Lisa, that is something that I deal with all the time with people who run businesses, right? Like they should know, the attitude is they should know already coming in. Why do I have to sit there and explain all of this stuff? Like, because part of this is just the free market. It works this way. And so it's not like, but then they're going to dominate the workplace. So it's going to shift. And so we all have to make adjustments. And unfortunately, they weren't mentored the way they needed to be in preparation for actually working in the workforce, right? In terms of understanding free market and the laws of how everything works, right? And I'm not saying about our opinions. I'm talking about just commerce as a whole. It just is an animal to itself. And so some of the belief systems you're bringing in is just not going to work. Right. And so, but there's going to need to be flexibility on both sides so that they can rise up to understand what they do need to learn to be successful. And then the older generation being able to do the best they can to pass on what they can to help them. Because we will be exiting, you know, soon. Okay, I'm going to end with Nam because it's 6:45 and I haven't heard much of you. So what was your aha moment? I know you jumped on late. Did you get anything?
I know.
Or
Sorry.
did you
go
get an
ahead.
aha out of whatever you were able to listen to?
My aha is, I think partially was from the earlier call this morning too, is I think it's kind of a bigger burden on the leadership. You know, it's almost like we're now called to inspire these guys, you know, and give them something more to strive for than just money and a job. You know, they need to have more. And I think if we can give that to them, they're gonna, you know, like I read the last three things that you had, millennials and all that. They choose their leadership. They're looking at Google. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for direction. So I feel like if we can do that on our side and get our stuff together, like you were trying to say, Renee, like we got to have our stuff together, right? And I think if we can do that, I think there'll be a very happy medium with the Gen Xers, Zers, whatever, come what may. They just want to be inspired, you know, and they're smart and they're loyal and they'll do it. We just got to figure out what is going to motivate them.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Yeah, great conversation. Sorry for going over. Thank you so much for staying on a few more minutes. It's going to be a great conversation. Next week, please listen to this recording previous to coming and you'll be fresh to be able to have the next conversation. Real quick, I had an issue with recording last week, Wednesday. Do I have your permission to share your Tuesday recording of last week on nonverbals with the Wednesday group? Is that okay? Okay, great. All right. All right, great. And if anybody's not comfortable, I'm open to that and I won't do it. So, okay. It pretty much was, everybody was in their breakout room doing their thing anyway. So, okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for trusting me with your journey and I will see you next week. Good job. Good job conversing.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I'll stay on if anybody has a question. Bye, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Layla.
Thanks, Renee. How's your doggies? Oh.